All right.
We're back at it again.
Yes, we are. We are back at it again.
The most frequent.
The most
Yes.
frequent. Okay.
The most frequently recorded.
Yeah, that's right.
I went and posted our last conversation that was recorded.
Oh, I saw that was up.
Yeah. We talked about a lot of human psychology related things.
Did we?
Yeah.
That was a while ago now, wasn't it? I don't remember.
It's like
I didn't listen to it.
2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
Like
Yeah, I know we skipped a couple weeks.
I think we skipped one, and then last one we didn't record. So I think it was 3 weeks ago.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I remember that discussion.
Yeah, we talked about
like
trust and vulnerabilities.
Yes.
Like, how do you build trust in a person or in your team?
Yes.
And then like being vulnerable to like share ideas with people.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I don't think there was a lot of. I think that whole conversation went by pretty well. Because I mean, I don't think there was any like. I don't think there was like anything in particular that I was like asking or anything. I think it was.
No, we just were talking.
Just a conversation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that one went really well.
All right. Well then, let's. You don't have any things written down.
I don't have any things written down. I know we're going to have some discussions with the team this week, tomorrow.
Right.
I've been writing some things down overall for myself, but nothing to like bring here to talk about. But it will be an interesting discussion.
Yeah.
Tomorrow. We may have other things to talk about afterwards.
Probably.
Yeah.
What are some like themes? I mean, reviews are happening right now.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they are. It's taking up a lot of time.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, what's kind of on your mind? What's on my mind?
I don't know. I have not, as of late, I have not been really thinking about much.
Yeah, I haven't
because
either.
There's just been a lot of other stuff to occupy my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been a lot of things, specific things happening.
Turned off. Let's see if it's still.
Let's see if it's still going.
Let's guess.
Is it? You guess so?
Maybe.
All right.
I don't know.
We can find out. We might not talk about much today. Well, yeah, there's some, I mean, I don't,
I don't know. If you were to listen to two people in the QA profession, like what's something that you would want to hear them talk about? Like what would be something that you would go to that type of material for?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I have an answer for that.
Grease in the chair.
Like, as a general rule, listening to people, there's only like a couple people I ever listen to or read.
Yeah.
Because I find that most everything that people write about or talk about, and it may have changed recently, but I think most of it, people are, a lot of things ignore context. And a lot of things are like so entrenched in an idea to sell their idea.
Right.
Just to get more views and whatever it is. And which is fine. But I think it's really important to listen to those ideas as what they are, and then put them through a filter based on where you are, and based on the problems that you already know exist. Because it's just, and I don't know, I think probably every time we talk, I say this, is that it's easy to like manufacture problems.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you don't realize it.
Right.
Like you can convince yourself that there's a problem that needs to be solved, and the thing you just read on the blog will solve it for you. But it's dangerous. And there's also the what is that? There's a term, and I can't remember what it is. There's a bias. You tend to look for things that you agree with, or that will
support your
support your biases. So I think there's a lot of that when you're, and I know this is not the point of what you asked for. We're just like to start talking about things,
wherever this leads us,
right? So I'm making the case that people shouldn't listen to what I'm saying, maybe. I don't know. I just, when I think about listening to people and how they approach things, the way I like to do it is you read things and you have to like take a step back and digest the things that they're talking about, and break them down. And if you can take bits and pieces, if there's like just generally good ideas, and they can be applied in different ways based on the context of where you are and what you're trying to solve, I think that's a decent way to do it, and I think that's less risky. But if you just have a general feeling that QA or whatever it is should be doing X, Y, and Z everywhere, then you read it in a blog and say, see, this person said we should be doing X, Y, and Z, so let's do that here. And without considering what we're trying to do as a company and the structure of that company and who we have here sitting at seats and what the strategy is for everyone involved, then you're going to end up exposing holes. So,
what about like with where lots of companies want to like go with the whole like Scrum, Agile, all of those models because they see everybody else doing it.
Because they see everyone else doing it?
Well, they either see people, see, as in they are aware of other people doing it, or because other people have said that this is what everybody's doing.
Okay, so if you're a company and you see, everyone's doing Agile, and everyone seems to be doing it, and I think they're successful. Let's do Agile, just because everyone's doing it, and I think that's the new wave, and that's the cool thing to do.
Right.
I think that's terrible. I don't think Agile is terrible. I think it works, but if you approach that way and see something out there that's shiny that people are doing everywhere and say, we got to do that because everyone's doing it, then I think that's a terrible approach. If you say, okay, outside, not knowing what Agile is, if you sit down and really say, we have problems with delivering software, and I have identified all of these problems, our releases take too long, and we spec out features, and by the time we deliver the features, because that process is so long, the customers want something different, and we have no way to know until we're 8 months down the line that we've delivered something that they don't want anymore. We have to figure out a way to like get stuff in front of customers quicker to get quicker feedback, and know when things are in trouble earlier on. If you identify all of the problems, like objectively identify the problems that you have with how you develop software, and those problems can be solved, and then you look at, okay, this is Agile and Scrum, and this is how typically things run, and that can solve the objective problems that I've already defined, then absolutely, and say, okay, this has been successful. A lot of people are doing it, and everyone that has said this is worth trying or worth doing or has made us successful has solved the same problems that we've defined, then that is smart. Then I can say, yeah, then that's a really good idea. Then do that. But the problem I see more often than not is you look at something like Agile and say, all of the really cool companies are doing this thing. This is what the industry now is doing. Everyone's doing this, and they're doing all of these things. I read all these things. Yeah, this is a really good idea. And then but then you go backwards, say, okay, we're going to look at our problems. Yeah, we have that problem. Yeah, we have that if we do that, then we will solve the problem. But if you look at something backwards through the lens of the solution, you will almost always, if you want to do the thing that the solution has, then if you look at it through that lens, then more often than not, then you will find those problems, whether or not they really objectively exist.
Right.
So yes, so that's why I try to look at. I mean, it's good to read. If people have new ideas, right, and it's always good to hear someone's opinion on how they've implemented a solution
Right.
somehow. I mean that's fine. I find it unless you can like take a step back and read those things objectively. Without any sort of goals in mind, I think it's, I don't know, I find it's dangerous. Maybe that's too strong of a word. I don't know.
Potentially dangerous?
Risky, I guess. I just think there's just so much context that gets left at the door when you see someone with a big name do something that's cool. Right? Somebody gets up on a stage at a conference and says, we did this project, this thing, and it's really, really cool, and let me show you all the numbers that we can do. And it's real easy to get caught up in that and say, oh yeah, we got to do the same thing. This is really cool. We can make a name for ourselves, or I can make a name for myself if I did this also. And I mean, if it makes sense, if you've already identified a problem that what they're doing will fix, awesome. But if not, you may be spending a whole bunch of time doing something for little benefit.
Right.
Well, the critical path is crumbling around you.
Yeah. Was there any point that you got caught up in one of those instances? Or have you found yourself able to avoid getting caught up in the excitement of a solution?
Well, I mean, I got very much caught up in automation, and because it's fun,
Yeah.
right? I could spend all day doing that all the time, just my head buried in automation code. But I have found myself, if you put those blinders on and do that only, then I've caught myself trying to solve problems within that automation. How are we going to run this, and how is it going to be? What's the best way to do this? What's the best kind of framework? And spend all the time focusing on how to solve the automation problem rather than how to solve the testing problem with the automation. And I think I've mentioned that before.
Yeah.
That's how, and I feel that way because I've gotten caught in that. And I've seen like projects that I manage because of that start to suffer. Like huge bugs go through. And it's not because I just didn't have time or to catch up with the automation to test those things. It's because you get rolling with the automation and you try to solve that, and you're so focused on the automation that you end up just automating what's there. Because that's the thing. And
Right.
you have, okay, so here's the feature. Now I have enough to automate on the front end, because now it's implemented. I can automate it. Awesome. I'm just going to build all this stuff with what's been delivered. And then you've got all of the scripts working and everything is great. And then you realize that there's a huge hole in the workflow. And the automation is passing. It's all green, but it's passing by following the steps that are actually maybe not correct. And it's that how do you validate that? And this happened a couple times with, and this is a long time ago, but identifying like the problem, the business problem. What is the problem that we need to solve for our customers?
Right.
And that's the thing to focus on. And and testing is important, like all the way down, and automation is important all the way down. But if you get so wrapped up in those solutions, there's a risk of missing out on the validation of the business problem itself. I think I just ranted for a little bit. Yeah.
That's good.
Maybe talking in circles today. I don't know.
I have a question, but I'm trying to think of if there's a way to make it less questional and more.
Yeah, we're not talking today.
I'm not good with starting conversations.
No.
More of just prompting questions. So the question is,
okay.
What's the best piece of advice you've gotten? But I don't know how to make that into a just a
conversation. Yeah. You can answer it first. I guess we're still just answering questions and not having a conversation. The best piece of advice.
I don't know if you want to go with professionally or personally, or if they were the same. If it was good advice for both your professional life and personal life.
The thing that comes to mind first was this back in college. I had a professor. He's like a professor of jazz studies, and we had like a fusion jazz band, and I sang. And there was like, I don't know how many people sang. We did a bunch of different kinds of stuff. There's a big band that we had, and we also had maybe, how many singers? Like 18 singers. And we did stuff from like old school big band stuff to, we did a lot of Sting, like rock fusion and jazz. It was great. It was really cool. It was like one of the best things that I remember. But professor told us a story about Miles Davis. He would just like go to clubs and listen to people, and he told the story about this one like real young kid was at a club and doing some stuff, and Miles Davis he was really loved what he was doing, and heard anything like it before. And this was just a young kid, had like no name, didn't know who he was. And this was Miles Davis after he was huge. He caught up with him after the gig, and just talked to him about what he was doing and why he was doing it and where it came from and had he thought it through, and they like talked about it. So, and so he left us with that. So what the point of it was, he said, is so if somebody at the top of their career at that level, like Miles Davis, can ask some young kid who had no name, who had no idea who he was in a small club somewhere, if he can ask him questions about what he was doing and why, and put himself in that position, then there's no reason that any of you shouldn't do the same thing. Like, you should never be at a point where you can't ask someone questions because you think you know more than someone else. So, yeah.
That's good.
So always be learning, and always, I guess, feel. But that takes enough, like a certain level of confidence in your own ability to be, I don't know, humble enough to ask questions on how people do things, or to appear that you don't know everything.
I would say my takeaway from that would be like, never assume that you have learned everything or know everything.
Yeah.
Because there's going to be people that surprise you.
Yeah.
So don't shut yourself off from those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's a particular piece of advice that I've gotten. Well, I don't think I've had advice given to me specifically. I would say most of my things that any sort of advice is things I've pulled from listening to other people, or pulling from many different sources. But I don't know. It's a lot of just the little things that I try to reiterate every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
It's just don't wait for somebody to, make the thing you want.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that story is another one. Don't assume that you know everything. Don't expect to ever get to a point where you don't need to, or where you need to stop learning.
Yeah.
Don't ever get comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can enjoy where you are, but don't get comfortable to the point where you stop wanting to better yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are all good.
A lot of those come from just random talks that I've watched or things I've listened to, and those are just what I've pulled out from them.
Yeah.
Just yeah. I don't know. Just interesting to see what other people have, big things that people have taken away from certain experiences.
Mm-hmm.
don't know if I've ever just like explicitly been given advice, or the advice I've been given has been silly.
Oh yeah, and I guess there's different things for different parts of life, right? Yeah. I'm kind of empty today.
I don't know. Maybe I'm at a different point these past few weeks or so. I've been thinking less than I usually am about different things.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably
just
partly
doing because there's a lot going on.
Well, I think that's part of it. I think the other part is like I have like a creative outlet right now, so my brain is more occupied by those things.
Yeah. What is that? Is it outside here?
No, well, I mean it's anywhere really.
Oh, okay.
But with like playing D&D.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Since I'm running a campaign, like my brain is occupied by a lot of that. So I'm thinking less about test and QA and other related things, and more about like world building and storytelling. Although I have tried thinking about how, because I would like to actually run a session or a couple sessions with the whole QA team, because I mean, like, my exposure is with D&D, but one of like the main parts about D&D is like, you know, critical thinking and improvisation and planning and like so many different skills that I find myself using on a day-to-day basis, and I would be curious to see like how other people react to that sort of experience. So I guess that is something I have been thinking about. Is like how could I take people through like that sort of experience? Because one, it could be looked at as a form of like team building.
Yep.
Others would be improvisational, like practice. Risk assessment.
Oh yeah.
Because like you're figuring out, you know, if we do this thing, like what could be, you know, what could happen if we take this route versus this route, and you know, being aware of like the environment you're in, and I mean, there's so many different things that could be like worked out or flexed. So it would be an interesting experiment to run, taking people through like a session. Yeah,
I'd be down for that.
It seems like an interesting idea.
It is. Would you just do would you fit it into a certain, I don't know.
I mean, there's a
You
lot
just
of
run
like
through
constraints that
Yeah.
there would need to be, like, you know, figuring out times that work for people and other things like that, because like
Right.
the more people, the harder it is to get through content,
Yeah.
because depending on if people are wanting to like talk with each other, either in or out of game, it's like all of that starts to add up, and you know, giving yourself an hour to try to get through stuff, you end up getting through a small fraction of what you planned on. So that's typically why, like, when I used to play when I was younger, like we would play for many hours.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, I think we would run, I don't know, in my head I remember it as being like from like 6 to like 11 or midnight or something. It was like 5 or 6 hours of just playing.
Yeah.
I think it could have been 4 hours, but it felt like it was like much longer than that. Not in terms of like a bad thing, but it just felt like we were there for a long time, being able to do things. But yeah, like taking like that sort of like putting yourself into unfamiliar environment and like you know, figuring out what to do next.
Assuming a different role than you typically do.
Yeah, and that's kind of why, like, when I've thought about it, I was like, well, like, how could we do this to where instead of like fantasy whatever, we make it trying to utilize our abilities in the real world,
Right.
and actually like go through, like, I mean, essentially like doing like mock test scenarios, but in this different setting where you're actually trying to like go through these processes, like the overall like campaign is that of like a feature, and like figuring out like, you know, how do you utilize your skills and abilities. I mean, essentially like what we were doing with our little user empathy training stuff.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
I mean, I also wouldn't just mind just playing D&D instead of like coming up with something else. Yeah, I don't know. I'm still playing around with that in my head.
A QA inning.
Yeah.
In D&D.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many people would be interested for that, but I'm sure it would probably not be that many. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, I've been thinking about that. I haven't really been like reading any books to spark new ideas, so that's probably also partly why I haven't really been thinking about other things.
No, I've been just focused on getting stuff out the door myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I've got, I mean, there's some other things I've been like working on as far as documenting ideas and stuff, but that may be a discussion for after tomorrow.
Yeah.
After the test talk.
Yeah, I still don't know where that's gonna go.
Yeah, I don't either.
Time will tell.
Yep.
I don't know.
Oh, I should maybe call it early.
Yeah, we could do that.
And then I got a few things to pick up before I get out of here.
Sounds good. Let's.
I'll think of some things. I think we'll be.
I mean, something I would be interested in talking about is like continuing that discussion of like the risks that we were talking about before, about like having that triangle of like, you know, you're doing like, if you're handing off one of your tasks to somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
that then takes away from the available time that they have for their other things that they could be doing.
Yeah.
So then how are you then, like, I guess, providing that value to outweigh that cost?
Yes.
I think that would be an interesting thing to discuss.
That is very interesting to me, and I'm, like I said, I hope that a bunch of the discussion ends up centering around that. Yeah, because I think it's an interesting idea to push some of what you do to someone else so you can focus on things. But yeah, what does that cost? And it's not just like a time cost. It's like a ripple thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like the thing that you would do better than the other person, if you hand that off, there's a cost in maybe the quality.
Sure.
You don't know. At least there's an increased risk if someone who's not used to it, or maybe doesn't want to put their full energy into it because that's not what they do. There's that, and there's also if they're doing something that's taking away from what they were hired to do. There's that cost also.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe we can talk through some examples of what that is and what that risk would be and what the cost would be.
Yeah, there's so many different things that could be affected differently.
Yeah.
Whenever you throw in a new either process or like new thing that people are gonna be working on.
Yeah. And maybe that is solving the wrong problem too.
Sure.
So if you're getting someone to do something, if you're offloading something that is on your plate to someone else so you can spend time on something, maybe there's you think of it a different way. Maybe you don't think, I don't have enough time to do this thing because I spend, so if the real context, I don't have enough time to build tools because I have to do manual testing.
Right.
So I'm going to give manual testing to the web developers. Maybe another way to think of it is, okay, let's not think of the manual testing as the thing that I have to offload that's wasting all my time or taking up too much of my time. Maybe think of it like holistically. I need more time to do tooling. How can I make this better? And maybe the solution is maybe you're spending too much time manually testing because you're spending time posting bugs because you're finding issues.
Yeah.
And how do you solve that maybe more efficiently is to think about testing and have conversations with developers on how to also think about quality and how to build their things better so that all you have to do is validate that you're solving the business problem.
Right.
And then you'll have more time for tooling.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just different ways to think through things.
Yeah, I mean, it's the finding the actual root cause,
Yes.
which is not always easy because there potentially could be a lot of causes in front of you, so you're not seeing the like root behind it.
Yeah.
So you might think that the root is at that point, but it could stem even deeper than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe, and it could be just as simple as if there's a problem that you want to solve, you think of a couple different solutions, or talk it through, and then discuss what the risks are of doing either or, and what the benefits are. And think of it in terms of the company.
Right.
Like, what's the return on investment if one person in one role is doing this versus another person in another role doing this?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that takes putting the company first.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly.
All right.
Anyway.
Then we will end it there.
Okay. And then, yeah, that's worth